Hi there everyone, this is Ashley with Marshflower Studio. In this video I'm going to be showing you guys how I make my little rain frogs. There are a couple different variations that I'm going to talk about while I'm making them, so you can kind of decide which style, which look you like a little bit better and go with that. These guys don't take very long to make, they're pretty simple. You've got the main body and then you've got 4 legs, and then if you choose to do the little eye hoods, those are also made separately and sewn on. So I'll talk about some of the different things that I did here. And one of the most important parts of the rain frog to myself and my daughter, who suggested I try to figure out how to make one of these, was the little almost butt crack we have on the back of them. These frogs tend to look a little on the chubby side, and there are quite a few photos of them out there. If you just, Google it or search it, you'll see that little line in their rear end back here, and it's probably the only thing that makes these little frogs as adorable and cute and funny as they are. But lots of kids have told me that they love frogs. Right now we're moving into the spring season when I'm making this video, so lots of things that tend to come out in the spring or remind people of the spring and the summer do really well at a lot of these spring and summer vendor events. So we'll get started on some of the details about what we have going on here. These 2 frogs were made with this Premier puzzle yarn. It is a 100% acrylic yarn. It's variegated and it has, the twisted colors as well as the color changes. This color is called Maze, M-A-Z-E. So if that is something you would like specifically to try to look for your frog, or just in general, I know sometimes I watch other creators making videos and I'm like, I really wish I knew what yarn that was so I could try to find it. So I like to make sure I mention that. So that is what the first 2 are made of. The one for the video, I'm actually going to be just using this Red Heart Super Saver yarn in Frosty Green. It can be a little hard to see the stitches when you're using something like the puzzle yarn. It's a little bit thicker. The puzzle yarn is considered a bulky number 5, whereas the Red Heart that I'm using is considered just a medium number 4. So the frog for the video is going to be a little bit smaller than the sample frogs. With the puzzle yarn, I did use a 5mm hook. Sorry. Oh, allergies year round. My apologies. So the puzzle yarn, I used a 5mm hook just because it is a little bit thicker, but I still like to go with a hook size that's smaller than what they recommend, just because with the tension that I have, I like to have my stitches nice and tight and close so you're not seeing any of that stuffing if I do have to stuff something a little bit more firm. So these guys were the 5mm hook with the puzzle yarn. Because the yarn I'm using for the video is smaller, I am going to be using my full 4mm hook for this one. And we'll see just what the size difference is here. When we get finished. So before I start on the actual pattern and getting him made, I just want to point out you do need scissors. It's kind of a duh, but we have our scissors here. You will need some type of yarn needle. This one specifically is considered a darning needle because the tip is bent down at the bottom. For me, it just makes it easier when I'm attaching these pieces to kind of get under some of those stitches and then back out without having to stretch the stitches too much. Because there again, you can have stuffing start to show through when you start pulling on those. So you need some kind of yarn needle to attach those legs. But we will get started and use those in just a little bit. So we are going to start with a magic circle. If you are not familiar with a magic circle, that's totally fine. You can do a chain 2 and then work your stitches into the first chain that you created, and it will be fine. So we are working from the nose towards the butt, and we're going to start with 6 single crochets in our magic circle. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So we've got our first 6. We're going to continue with our next row. We're going to do an increase and then a single crochet, and we're going to end up with 9 total stitches for this row. So our increase, we have 1 and 2, and then our single is 3. We have another increase, 4 and 5, and then 6 by itself. 7 and 8 is an increase, so those are together. And then 9 is by itself. All right. For row number 3, we've got 2 single crochets and an increase. And our total row count for this is going to be 12. So we're going to do 1, 2, and then 3, 4 are together. We'll do 5, 6, and then 7 and 8 together. Do 9, 10, and 11 and 12 are together. All right, for row number 4, and if this is going too fast at any point, just hit pause, and then you can unpause it as soon as you kind of catch up. I try to go a little quick so that our videos are not taking 10 times longer than absolutely necessary. So our next row, our stitch count is going to go to 15. So we're going to have 3 single crochets and then an increase. So 1, 2, 3, and then 4 and 5 will be together. We'll do 6, 7, 8, and then 9 and 10 are together, and then 11, 12, 13, and then 14 and 15 are together. All right, got a nice little rounded cone shape started here. Our next row is going to be 4 single crochets and an increase. So this takes our count out to 18. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 and 6 are together. 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 and 12 are together. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18 are together. All right, for our next row, we're going to jump out to 24 stitches total. We're going to go back to 2 single crochet and then an increase. So 1, 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Okay. I didn't mention it earlier, but you do need to make sure that once you get to a certain point, you make sure that that magic circle is pulled as tight as it can go, because we don't want that nose to kind of slowly open back up once we're all finished. All right, our next row is going to be counting out to 30, so 3 single crochets in an increase. So 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. All right. So now for rows 8 through 12-ish, I'll explain that in a second, it's just single crochet. So what I'm going to start with is 2 single crochets, and then I'm going to use one of my stitch markers. I use the large hairpins because this is just an easier tool for me. Some of the ones that are more like safety pins or the spiral circles are just a little too bulky for me to work around. This slides on easy, it doesn't just fall off, and it's much thinner if you're just going to work right over the top of it on the next row. So I like these, I prefer them. So we're doing at least 5 rows of single crochet, and I say at least 5 with my 2 little sample frogs here. My first little guy has 5 rows, and my daughter said he looked a little short from front to back. So with the next one, I actually did 6 rows in between. And he does look a little different because he doesn't have the eye hoods up top, so that kind of throws off, you know, the length perspective there. But this one only has 1 extra row in this kind of middle part of the body. So having them shorter or longer in this midsection is just up to you, and you can add or take away as many of these, we'll call them tummy rows, as you want. And we'll talk about the eyes in just a minute. And again, if we move too fast through this tummy section for you, just hit pause. And once you've caught up, you can jump back on and keep going. Someone made a comment in one of my other videos about how fast I work. I've been crocheting for almost 30 years. And I have taken some breaks from it here and there. But I learned very young from my grandmother. My great-grandmother was one of the ladies that would make all the fancy doily type pieces to go on dining room tables and on the buffet under the fancy china dishes. I remember in her house, she had a dining room table, and she had an entire tablecloth that had been crocheted. And at the time, I was too young to really appreciate how much work had gone into that thing. But it was massive, and it was decorative, and it had all these flowers on it and raised flowers, which is really cool. Unfortunately, I have no idea what happened to it when they finally moved her out of her house. This is row 5 for me. And for this guy, especially because this yarn is a little bit thinner, he will be getting 6 rows of tummy space. I know frogs and toads typically have short bodies, but sometimes when you make them too short, it's like, it's not gonna work. I'm going to do one more row. So this guy will have 6 rows of tummy. If you wanted to make him even longer, totally could. Okay. So take a pause for just a second to do the eyes. So you got this weird little cone shape going right now. But as soon as we start working the last 4 rows, it will pull this in pretty quick to kind of create that little bit more of a flat butt that we got going on with our frogs here. So I've got lots of different eyes. A lot of these are purchased in packs of multi-sizes. So I'm not always exactly positive which ones are which size because they're never labeled. We'll grab some backs. Let's make sure these actually match. Yep. All right. So I've flattened my little body form here to kind of help me figure out where I want to place the eyes, because I don't want them to just be like off the sides of his head. I want them to be in just a little bit. And then we have to decide which row we want them on. So these guys are currently, let's see, 1, 2, 3. They're between 4 and 5. I think that's going to work for me. And then they are 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 stitches apart. So depending on how your stitches fall, you may want to do 4, you may want to do 5. Especially if you have an increase in here somewhere in between. That'll work for my little froggy. So we'll pop the backs onto these eyeballs. Okay. And it really doesn't matter as far as like top bottom goes on these. You just kind of have to make a decision and roll with it. All right, so depending on how many rows of tummy you had, it's going to change the number of row that you're currently on. But once you're finished with your rows of tummy, we're going to do 3 single crochets in a decrease, and it takes your stitch count down to 24. So let's see. I want a couple past where my starter is. I've already got 2 single crochets here. I'm going to do 1 more, and then my decrease. 6, 7, decrease on 8, 9, 10, 11, decrease on 12, 13, 14, 15, decrease on 16, 17, 18, 19, decrease on 20, 21, 22, 23, and decrease on 24. Our next row is going to be 2 single crochets and a decrease. 1, 2, decrease on 3, 4, 5, decrease on 6, 7, 8, decrease on 9, 10, 11, decrease on 12, 13, 14, decrease, 17 to 18. All right. So you can see I've left my kind of starter tail hanging out here. I like to use those to help tie off a knot in the end before I kind of weave everything in and out of sight. If it's not something you're worried about, not something you do, you can tuck it in, get it out of the way. For our next row, we're going to do 1 single crochet and a decrease, so it takes us down to 12 for our total row count. So 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, I'm going to take my stitch marker out because it's starting to get on my nerves. And we're going to stuff our little frog here. I have just a regular standard polyfill that I use. For a lot of the events that I do around here. I do have questions about what's inside of them. So I stick with just a traditional find anywhere polyfill. That's what's in most of the pillows that people have on their couches. It's what's in most just store-bought stuffed animals. So telling people it's the same thing as in store-bought stuffed animals or inside store-bought pillows kind of provides some comfort for them. I know I've heard of people putting all kinds of other versions of stuffing inside of these things that they make, and I'm like, oh my god, that's terrifying. I wouldn't want my kid, with a stuffed animal that's stuffed full of yarn, because if something happens and a piece, comes undone, then it's all these tiny little strings or wads of strings. Don't want that. Okay, so I've got him stuffed nice and firm here. I guess most of these little rain frogs are a little more on the chubby side, so we want to make sure that they look nice and chubby. Our last row here is just 6 decreases. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then I'll do a little slip stitch here, and then the next stitch to kind of fasten off my yarn here. Doing a slip stitch and that next stitch over just kind of brings the edge of those stitches back down to kind of make it a little bit more of a smooth transition as you close up this hole. So then I'm going to take my yarn needle and we're going to do the invisible close. So in the next stitch over, I'm going to go under the front loop only from the outside towards the inside, and then back out to the outside and under that front loop. So we're doing that all the way around. Okay, I'll pull it tight. And this is where I'll take my starter tail. Just make a little square knot. And then we will tuck this up through that center. And then you have this nice, clean finish on the end of your work. Cut that off. All right, so there's the body of your little rain frog. We'll go ahead and do one of the legs. You will need 4 of them, but I'm only going to do one and then explain a variation to the ones that I'll go ahead and explain the variation. So with my first little dude, I did these legs, kind of an experiment. These legs, you have 6 single crochets in a magic circle. You have 2 rows of single crochet, so a total of 12 just single crochets around. And then to create the toes on this little dude, we did single crochet and then a chain 3 to kind of create the edge of the toe, slip stitch 2 back, and then you do the same thing, a single crochet, chain 3, slip stitch 2 to create a toe, and then single crochet, chain 3, slip stitch 2, single crochet, and then I had 3 single crochets on the end just to kind of finish out the row. And the feet, the legs are hollow. They're not closed in. So this provided a little bit of a wide leg for this little toad man. Personally, I wanted something a little bit more balanced with his size. So with the second one, it's very similar, except we did just 4 single crochets in the magic circle, and then we had, you know, the 2 rows of single crochet, so 8 single crochets total for the actual leg part. And then with the toes, the toe that I did with the first one seemed a little too big for this slightly smaller, skinnier leg. So I did a single crochet, we did chain 2 with 1 slip stitch, so the toes are shorter. Without attaching it, we did another chain 2 for the second toe, slip stitch, then we attached into the kind of bottom of the leg with a slip stitch, and did another chain 2 with a slip stitch to create that third toe. I'm going to do it with the other yarn just to kind of have the visual as well. But these again are hollow inside. I mean, they're tight enough that you can't stick your finger in there. But slight variation on the legs depending on if you want the slightly skinnier version with the slightly smaller toes, or if you want the fatter version with the slightly bigger toes. Okay, so it's up to you. 2 ways to do it. Neither way is wrong. We're going to do the smaller leg for this guy that we're making today. So I'm going to have my magic circle, do 4 single crochets in our magic circle and pull that tight. And then we have 4 or 8 single crochets total. Gotta make sure those turned right side out. All right, that was my 8 single crochets for that little leg. And of course, you can add a couple more if you feel like the leg should be a little longer. Okay, so for our toes, we're going to do single crochet. We're going to do a chain 2. We're going to slip stitch into that second chain from the hook for toe number 1. Then we're going to do another chain 2. We're going to slip stitch into the second chain from the hook to create that second toe. And then we're going to slip stitch into the next spot on the base of that leg. So it attaches those first 2 toes to the leg. Then we'll do another chain 2. Again, slip stitch into the second chain from the hook. And then slip stitch into the base of the leg. I'll do another slip stitch just to kind of finish that row and fasten it off. We'll cut enough yarn of a tail to sew this to the bottom of our new little froggo. All right. So depending on if you want your froggy legs to be on the outside edge or underneath, you know, just kind of pin them in place to sew them where you want them to end up. But you need 4 of them sewn on there. I recommend making all 4 and kind of pinning them in place to make sure you like where the legs are before you actually attach them. But those are the legs. If you want to do the eye hood that we have going on up here, there's different ways that you can do it. I will show you how I make all of my little eyelid hoods for creatures and critters, and that is with a foundation chain. So this is something that not everyone is familiar with. We're going to start with how we normally start a chain. So you've got your knot and your 1 loop on your hook. Okay, so you're going to do a chain 2, and then in that second chain from the hook, we're going to go through, yarn over, pull it back, and now we have 2 loops on our hook. But instead of doing a regular single crochet, we're going to yarn over and pull through the first loop, and then yarn over and pull through both. Okay, and then to continue going with this, we're going to put our hook in this loop that's kind of like we have our 2 loops that are on our working thread up here. We're going to go to the one that's just below that. Okay, we're going to go under that like it's a front loop only, yarn over and pull through. So we've got 2 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through the first, and then yarn over and pull through both. Okay, There are other videos out there that probably do a much better job of explaining this foundation chain. But once you kind of get the hang of it and figure out which loops you're using when, they're really not that bad. And if you're doing blankets and you struggle with your base chain being too tight, and then it looks like the end of your blanket's kind of squeezed in at the bottom, doing the foundation chain as your original row fixes that problem. Okay, so with our frog eyelids, all we need is 2 of these foundation chains here. So I'm going to do a little slip chain going on here. I'm going to cut my working yarn. So it's just a tiny little piece. And then we will sew that right behind his eye to kind of give him that eyelid that he needs. And again, some like the eyelid, the eye hood, some prefer not. Totally up to you, whichever way you think he looks cuter. But that's how we do the eyelid. We've got our feet, we've got our body. The last thing we need to give this poor little guy before he is finished is his adorable little bum crack. So I use my yarn needle, just a section of yarn. That's probably 18, 20 inches. I always get more than I think I'll need, because sometimes we end up in a situation where we don't have enough. So I'm going to make sure that it's centered kind of between the eyes. I'm going to go down a row that's kind of below where I finished. With this guy, I don't want it to be too far. And then we'll go, let's see, we finished here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 rows up. And again, depending on how many tummy rows you did, you may want to go 1 more. I'm going to pull that through, make sure I've got some tail left. I'm going to go through the exact same spot again. Pull it tight, create that little bum crack. And then I'll use just a square knot. And if you like this method and you tie a knot in it, make sure that it is close to where you entered back here, so that when you tuck it through, you don't have that knot still hanging out outside of your frog or your gorilla or whatever you're giving a butt crack to. I have found, wasn't really surprised, but I have found that things that have butt cracks actually sell a lot better than their counterparts that are the exact same without a butt crack. I have a gorilla that I make, and I made one with and one without. The one with always sells super fast, and the one without usually kind of sits on the shelf for a little longer until somebody comes along that's just kind of like, oh, he's cute, I like him. But the fun aspect of the butt crack definitely helps them sell faster. So there's our little rain frog butt crack. We'll have his eye hoods attached. We'll finish making his legs and get those sewn on. So you can kind of see size-wise. We have our number 5 bulky yarn with a 5mm hook versus our number 4 yarn with a 4mm hook. And you can kind of see the difference in how those measure up as you go. So I guess this one should actually be over here because he had 6 tummy rows and this guy has 6 tummy rows. So changing yarn size and hook size definitely does make a difference in how they turn out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do that so that you can get notified when any other new videos come out. Make sure you check out videos that have already been posted. There is a ton of stuff on there. Most all of them are nice short projects that you can do in 30 minutes to an hour if you sit down and just work on them. Some of them are less. If you like the little rain frogs, hit that like button, and happy hooking, crochet nerds. We'll see you next time.